see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, I'm Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogs on How to Build a Culture of Empathy. And today I'm here with Alice Aird. Thank you for joining me, Alice.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Edwin. Thank you for inviting me.
And so I want to give a little bit of background. You're actually in Melbourne, Australia, and you're the founding director of the Empathy Foundation. And you have a website, a Ning site, which is empathyfoundation.ning.com. And I saw on your website, you've got this really beautiful write-up here where you say, I have come to understand that empathy grows empathy, and that the greater the human capacity for empathy, the greater our ability to cooperate in creating a peaceful and sustainable world. So that's what we are doing here at the Empathy Foundation, practicing empathy and growing more of it in the world. Empathy, universal empathy is possible. So that's very inspiring. So can you want to introduce yourself a little bit more, kind of more about your background? And I can also show your Ning site on the I can show the website here too if you.
Yeah, thanks, Edwin. Yes, well, you know, this is quite a huge ask, you know, and it's been great. It's been a great experience to dive into thinking about this because you know, I'm very passionate about empathy, as you can see, and that came out of a few years ago, just after my first grandchild was born, was when it really crystallized for me that empathy was the key to so much of what I've been looking for. And I was also looking for a way to, what is my purpose in the world? What am I supposed to be doing? And so that was when the Empathy Foundation, you know, jumped into being. And I collected some people, great good friends who wanted to join me in it, and we set this up. And in a way, it's kind of a background rather than a foreground at the moment to what I'm doing, because by doing that I discovered so much else that I needed to do and learn and put into place in me and in my life. I learned so much that I'm on the journey of creating the pieces, I suppose, which will enable me to contribute more as one of the growers of empathy in the world. And you know, one of the great things the Empathy Foundation's done for me is actually meeting you because it's connected me with other people who have this high value for empathy, who understand the importance of empathy. And you're doing something that I dreamed of, which is putting empathy on the map, you know, so that it's a buzzword, so it's a word everybody's talking about, like they talk about resilience, you know. So that was one of my dreams. So in a sense, I feel like the Empathy Foundation is as it is at the moment, is a tiny little foothold in terms of what our dreams of it might be. However, it's a connector, and it's, as it says there in what you read out, it's creating a place for us to practice and learn. But you didn't actually ask me that. You asked me about my background, didn't you?
Yeah, I just want learning, you know, I kind of introduced you a little bit, but I don't know a lot about you and your background.
Yes, well, my background was initially as a scientist, you know, but I think I've always been seeking for, you know, what is it that's what's missing? There's something not quite right, something I need to understand, and so I wanted to get to the truth, I suppose. So science is one of the ways that you dive into that, and it took me. Eventually, you know, I became a teacher and I taught science. And it was really much more about relationships and how people treat each other that was at the core. And then I had children myself, so I dived into, you know, how do you bring up children? And that became such an intense thing for me because I had such a strong desire to bring children up in a different way and, you know, perfectly, which was definitely sending me over the edge to insanity in the first year of being a parent, until I discovered meditation. And that took me on a journey of self-inquiry and, you know, really focusing on parenting and discovering myself for many years. And I sort of came up for air and, you know, looked around for what to do next, I suppose. And then I went into what I'm now doing, which is life coaching. A few steps in between that I've left out. But it was when my first grandchild was actually on the way that a book came into my life, which helped to crystallise make meaning of what had been going on in my life. And that was a book by an Australian psychologist called Robin Grill, who wrote the book Parenting for a Peaceful World. And this is absolutely an incredible book. You'll find quite a bit written about it on the Empathy Foundation Ning site. This is the book here. This is it here. And in fact, the foreword of this book is so accurately describes how I felt about it that I felt like I think I should get on this interview with Edwin and read the foreword.
Great.
But I don't think I can do that. But he says, it's a brilliant and original synthesis of leading edge research in the social and biological sciences. And it's a bold and innovative contribution to the literature on the changes needed to build the cultural foundations for peace, human rights, and environmental sustainability. And it truly is. And when I read this, it made the importance of child rearing, of empathic child rearing, absolutely spring off the page. And in fact, got to the point where I thought, it's all about empathy. It's empathy. That's what is going to make the difference to the future of the world. And funnily enough, I looked up empathy in Robin's index page in his book, which is actually not a very good index. It's a self-published book, and it's a brilliant book, but he shortchanged himself on the index, and he doesn't even have the word empathy in the index, which absolutely astounded me. But the book is absolutely full of it. And eventually it crystallised into, I've just got to work on helping people to understand the importance of empathy. And find out how do you grow it. And so that became really, really important to me. And then as I continued with my life coaching and trying to find what is that about, what's my particular contribution, it led me to studying to become a true purpose coach with the True Purpose Institute. And because this is such an incredible process to help us to get in touch with the individual that each of us, I believe, has, and that in an empathic environment we can nourish, and that will be the best thing we can possibly do for that child, for their community and family, and for the world. Okay. So I'm focusing at the moment in that direction. That's what I'm doing. I'm honing my skills and developing my methods for taking people into their true purpose, really reconnecting with it.
Well, I just noticed the bandwidth was going down a little bit. I might turn off my video. You won't see my video, but yes, I'll still see you, and I'll still be recording my video here.
That's a good idea, yes.
It just gives a little bit more bandwidth. Yeah, so it sounds like that you had that moment of insight by reading that book then. That was kind of like your aha moment with empathy.
Yes, I think it certainly was in really putting that word to it, and it made sense of so much of my life. It made sense of my focus around children. A whole lot of things just fell into place. So it was an aha moment, absolutely.
Okay. Well, before we get too much more into the empathy, I just wanted to, I have your Facebook page here. And I just wanted to show it. So it has a picture of you and some leaves and some flowers. I always wondered, what was the significance of that picture? Why is that so significant to you that you have it be your Facebook page, main photo?
Well, it's a very recent thing, as my Facebook page main photo, and I didn't do a lot of deep thought about it, Edwin, but it is a photo I took myself in our local forest. I actually live in country Victoria, about an hour northwest of Melbourne. And so, now you ask me, I'd say it's a small plant that's, it's not a splashy plant. It's quite vulnerable, and as so many of these species are, of our wildflowers. So it's beautiful, it's tender, it's vulnerable, and it's important.
Yeah, I just interviewed someone, Daryl. He's a researcher, and I asked him what his metaphor for compassion was, and he said it's like a flower for exactly those reasons. So that kind of brings me to the question about about metaphors that, that all empathy is often defined as the metaphors of standing in someone else's shoes, looking through someone else's eyes. And for me, empathy is like a cornucopia in that it kind of opens up the door to kind of this rich experience. And so I'm kind of wondering for you what your metaphor of empathy is. If you had to create one yourself, what would it be?
Well, it's a great question you asked, and I haven't ever really asked myself that before. So I did a bit of writing about it and was looking for what would it be. And one of the things that came to me is that it's and I haven't quite, it isn't quite crystallized yet, but one of the things that empathy does for me is it's that feeling that you actually enter into the world and travel through someone else's mind. You connect. And so it's like a spaceship or a traveling ship of some kind, that you can actually step into all these different lives and see the world in all these different ways. So a kaleidoscope is perhaps one possibility. But it's not even that, but it's more like one of those bubbles that you go down into the deep sea in, or something that you go, or a spaceship, or where you go into other worlds, but you have to have a special ship to take you there. And empathy is the ship. It connects you so that you are able to go to these other worlds and experience with someone what their view of the world is like, and their experience of the world is like. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's like a real adventure, kind of an object, a spaceship or an underwater diving bell, or submarine or something like that.
Yeah, and as you asked me that, I realised that it's one of those things that I absolutely love about the work I do, that in working with people in my business life energy coaching and working with them on their true purpose and so on, as they tell me about their view of the world and I'm staying attuned to them, all with the intention of how I can support them, but that I'm also travelling with them in a way, as much as it's possible. And that it's quite magical to do that and to experience some of their epiphanies with them.
Yeah. So what would be a metaphor for the opposite of empathy?
Yeah. What's yours?
I've got one. For me, it's being out in a desert. It's like in the Sahara, where it's hot, dry. There's no life. My lips are parched, my tongue is swollen, and I'm all alone.
Yeah, a lot of my sort of scenes that come up for me are about children, and I find that the way into empathy for anyone, for me, tends to be through children, because even with adults, when they're behaving in ways that I'm finding really awful, if I imagine them as a child, I can find empathy for them. I can see the child that was trying to be heard, to be seen, to have to belong, and all those things, and I can see that playing out in their current behaviour. So then I can feel empathy as I can for a child who's acting out and behaving badly, because I know that they're needing something. And what they need is to connect. So when I feel like that about an adult, I can get that feeling with an adult, then I can find a way to attune to them and to respond to them in terms of what they're really wanting rather than what they're doing to me, And so I suppose in the child that came to me about the opposite, and to me the opposite and the picture that comes for me is the child who's been shamed and the finger pointed at them, and who's been treated as something disgusting and bad and wrong, and that terrible crushing contraction that children and adults actually experience. You can see it more clearly in children. So to me, that's when empathy is missing. When we can leave a child in that state, because inadvertently we can do that to a child because they're really pretty sensitive, and we can say something which they take on board as meaning that they've been bad. But as soon as we see it, if we have empathy, we move to repair that and to repair the connection, to say, hey, it's not that you did anything bad, I just you didn't know about that. But it's not okay to do that because it hurts, or you smashed something, or whatever it is, you know. And so to me, that stricken child is kind of the image of the absence of empathy and leaving that child in that toxic, terrible state.
Yeah, it's the child. The opposite of empathy is like a child who's kind of alone and kind of being judged and shamed. Then
yes.
Kind of, yeah. So
they're lost in the desert, aren't they?
Yeah, that's it. It's a very alienating space to be at. So, so kind of the question is, how do we get, a large part of society has that kind of quality, and it's like, how do we get from there to everybody being in their spaceship, right? It's like a culture of empathy is everybody in their special capsule going on this journey, this wonderful journey together.
Yes, that's right. And moving into it out of each other's and feeling what it's like and going, wee, that's interesting. Yeah, yes, that's right. So that's the journey. And to me, it always comes back to childhood. And that means the child in the adult as well. So working with the inner child with empathy, working with ourselves with empathy. A big part of what I do in the true purpose process is that people are, it's the way to connect with a part of you that knows your purpose already. And, 95% or more of people can do this as long as they're open to the possibility that there is something or someone that knows their purpose and that they could connect with that part of themselves and dialogue and find out with their conscious mind something that's at the present in the unconscious. But in order to do that, there are barriers and and the ego is the barrier, because the ego is protective, and the ego doesn't want us to go there, fears us going there and knowing our purpose, as in so many things. So this protective ego that we often vilify, treating that protective ego with empathy, I really think is the starting point. Because why did we grow the ego that we grow? Why are the shields, the armour that people go into the world with the way it is? There are different kinds of armour. It can be aggressive armour. It can be a smiling face armour, the people pleaser type of armour, whatever. But these are all shields. They're coatings. They're not the real authentic self. And so coming to understand how we grow these ego parts in childhood and why, and then to have empathy for ourselves for having the ones we have, because we're so hard on ourselves, Edwin, don't you agree?
Yeah.
Do you agree?
The self-judgment and kind of judging ourselves and kind of the fears and all that. It's like, but the thing what comes to me is when you're talking about ego, is I actually have found that a little bit of the ego, a little bit of a difficult term. When I think of ego, I think of there's this little being inside of us, right? There's this bad, selfish little being. And it seems to me that the ego is more like a metaphor for fear and anxiety. That, we have these fears and anxiety, and that's kind of, somehow they've created this term ego, and fears and anxieties are maybe legitimate, and it's like how we go about dealing with them, which, like what you're saying, is that we want to empathize and face those fears and those anxieties and have empathy towards them instead of judge them and add to the greater stress.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I mean, ego has got that negative connotation, and I don't think ego is only fears and anxieties either, to me, as I'm understanding the term ego. And of course we all have different ways with words and different experiences, but what I'm talking about here is like the psyche being divided into different ways that we relate to the world. So there's an interface that we have with the world, and that's our ego, and we can step in and out of different parts, almost like sub-characters, and some of them are really effective and valuable. But it's when we become them, I suppose, that we lose sight of the fact that we aren't any one of these parts.
Oh, I see.
We can move in and out of them. So we can come to have mind sight, which is Dan Siegel's term, we can have that perspective on what's going on, that we're different when we're with this person this kind of circumstance, when we're feeling afraid in this kind of situation, certain parts of us come out. And when we start to understand this, we can dialogue with those parts of ourselves. And the key thing is that we do it empathically, that we do it in exactly the same way that we need to relate to other people. Every way that we've learned to relate to people that brings out the best in both of us and that helps us to connect. It works for ourselves as well. It works for these parts of us that are contracted and scared and often nasty and, you know, all of this. So if we can start to do that with ourselves, those of us who are aware enough and, you know, and who are like learned about this kind of stuff, that can then help us to do it with others who are behaving in really unpleasant ways and, you know, and so on, without judging them. But to come to the understanding that they have these protective ego parts because they've been wounded, and that we're not going to help that by telling them how bad they are and how they ought to be more empathic.
Yeah.
You know, we're only going to help that by somehow finding connection at the same time as we need to protect ourselves, of course, because some people can be incredibly violent, aggressive, and dangerous. You know, the damaged when the empathy centres of a child are not nurtured and nourished in childhood, we create a very dangerous human being, potentially, you know, like if it's very, very bad. And there's such a crushing of this flower of empathy, which I really do think of it as a flower, in early life, by shocking treatment, then we can create what really are monsters, people who have learnt the opposite of empathy. They've learnt that to step all over other people and to destroy people and to eliminate as many people as possible and get them out of their way is the way for them to survive in the world. And so we don't help anything by judging them, but we do need to understand how early life creates the type of ego structures that we interact with the world through, and what we can do about our own, how we can foster our relationship with our own ego to turn it into an ally on the path of putting our purpose into the world, rather than having this inner war going on, which is so painful.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about what I would call self-empathy, in the sense that it's kind of that awareness of what's going on inside of ourselves, and that you really value the dialoguing process between creating a dialogue within ourselves, maybe within different feelings or values that come up. And maybe, would you say, well, I could maybe say how I'm defining empathy. Like, I see 4 parts to empathy, like self-empathy, which is sensory awareness of what's going on inside of ourselves. A mirrored empathy, which is as I see you, you know, through mirror neurons, like kind of your feelings, your emotions are being reflected inside of myself through my own mirror neurons, which the neurons fire when we do an action and see an action, or feel a feeling or see a feeling. And then there's the third part of empathy, which I see as imaginative empathy, which is kind of like what, you know, scientists are calling perspective taking, or cognitive empathy, which is we have a sense of self-awareness, that we know that we're separate human beings, that we can kind of take the position of someone else and see the world kind of from their point of view. And then the fourth part of empathy, I call empathic action, and it's that as we kind of connect with each other, you know, through these other different levels, and we see each other's humanity and hold each other's humanity, you know, at the same time, that we kind of naturally want to contribute to the well-being of others, be it through conflict resolution, or, you know, just kind of working together in a creative way. So that's kind of the basic model I'm using for empathy. So I'm wondering how that kind of resonates with you.
It resonates very much, and I'd like to do something here in relation to empathy in terms of being present and the here and now, what we're doing, you and I talking on Skype with you in the US, me in Australia, and I'm being interviewed, is that I'm really aware that I'm actually not fully relaxed, that that a part of me is triggered in my ego, which feels that I have to perform and sound like I'm talking about, and that actually blocks him. So I'm really thinking about the empathy current between you and I,
Okay.
and what's going on with people who are listening as well as they listen, because I haven't said how I feel and how I already acknowledged my state right now, and I think that's really important, because often we ride over, and I've actually had a part of me that's really been very afraid of this interview. And I want to acknowledge that, because otherwise people feel it and they don't know why. And so I think it's important. I have a history of my particular upbringing where I got very disconnected from my purpose, in a sense, and from my feeling of being able to express my thoughts, being a deep thinker and all that, and not finding it easy to express the thoughts and to put them out into the world. I'm still battling with that, and I'm learning layers by layer by layer, and I'm learning to have more empathy for myself in that. And so I set high tasks for myself, like creating an empathy foundation, and being a true purpose coach. And there's parts of me, little child parts of me and teenage parts of me, that are going, oh, it's too hard, what are you doing? And there are real gaps in my learning, because when I was learning, and at the stage where I certain skill learning goes on in school and so forth, I was in such a cortisol-charged state of fear, that I couldn't learn certain things very well. So I bring that up because while you was going through those 4 kinds of empathy, it was actually freezing my brain. I wasn't able to take that in cognitively and really say, and I was feeling like, I have to say something intelligent about this. Can you relate at all to what I'm saying, Edwin?
Yeah, very much so. It's that those the kind of the different levels of empathy was kind of a very cognitive kind of part, and it was kind of causing you anxiety to you're feeling anxiety trying to kind of get the framework of it, to kind of understand it. And so that was like one part of it. The other part was kind of growing up. It sounded like you had some anxieties about. I wasn't quite clear. It was like anxieties about. I'm not really sure what that part was.
Articulating my thoughts.
Okay. Yeah.
I've had, I've always loved to think, and I've always loved to talk and converse about ideas. But when it comes to putting those ideas out into the world, the whole thing about writing essays for school and all that became very fraught. And so that's still an area of. I see it, and I'm bringing it up not to be just about myself, but to be about all of us, that we have these gaps in learning where we need scaffolding, we need some help. And this is one of the things that I think our world is very harsh about. We judge ourselves and each other. We like, well, you're an intelligent, well-educated person. Why can't you do this? Just do it. Get over it. Get over your fears, And actually, it's not really like that. That the kinds of traumas that happen to people of all kinds, such a range of them, have so many different effects on our development. And so we are funny mixtures of ability and disability, each of us. And so I see empathy as being about acknowledging that, being open about that, being aware that we're all learning and growing, and we may be very advanced in one part of our learning and growth, and we might be quite stunted in another. And
part of empathy is being able to share, like you just did. That the more you can share, the more space you open for others too. Kind of that. For example, when you're talking about your anxieties, I think of my anxieties in public speaking. Right? It's like, so it kind of the more we can share about our own anxieties or what's really going on inside of us, the more space we create for others to hear us as well. So when you're saying you had a difficulty kind of articulating your thoughts in I guess on paper or in your writings or maybe in class, or there was like an anxiety
Yes.
in doing that.
Yes, I think. Yes, I think that, as I've come to study this more and as I've become more empathic to myself and therefore more able to look dispassionately, to sort of at what goes on in my brain, I've come to realise I think I probably have some kind of specific learning difficulty. And again, I think this is so much more common than we realise, and that I used to get into trouble at school because they saw I was intelligent, you see. I had that label because I was a good thinker and talker. And then they'd tell me to write an essay and I couldn't structure my thoughts. I couldn't do that easily. So in order to have this interview, I've got pages and pages and pages here of things I've written. But when you ask me for 3 points, I go, oh, God, I don't know. You see, so that part, which is really important for putting your ideas out into the world and to write the articles and the book and the whatever, doesn't work particularly well in me. And I'm really interested in this because I think we try to be alone with things, and rather than how do we work collaboratively so that people who've got one set of things going well and then this gap, how do we more put it together so that we're doing it in a collaborative and teamwork way. And so, as you said, the more we can share, look, this bit just doesn't work for me. Who's good at it?
Yeah. So it's like there's kind of like a putting things in a kind of a systematic, organized way with the thoughts is not something that kind of didn't work with you so well. It was like you were struggling with that.
Yes, and no amount of people pressuring me and telling me to get on with it and just do it, does it. So that's where empathy comes in, because it develops.
Yeah.
It opens us up to an environment where we feel nourished, where we feel heard, where we feel loved the way we are, and where we can then together look at, well, what does go on? When do you at what point do you find that you can't do it anymore? Let's tease it out and find what needs to be built here. So to me, that's what an empathic approach to education would be, for instance, and I think to each other, to children, to all the way along.
So instead of kind of putting pressure on someone, which is kind of like a force or a judgment, saying, "Oh, you should do this," or judging it as good or bad, is just kind of being present with it and just hearing what it is and empathically bringing presence to whatever is happening.
Yes.
Whatever is happening.
Genuinely being interested. Yeah. Yes. Whatever is happening is what's happening, and that's what we can, and that acceptance and curiosity and delving into. I just think it's amazing what can be healed then, what can be rebuilt that wasn't built. I don't know if this is answering any of your questions.
Oh, yeah. So I think we're actually doing the empathy, right? It's like we're actually exploring empathically. I'm trying to hear what it is where you are and trying to reflect back what I'm hearing. And I don't know, I'm doing...
Yeah, and I'm feeling that too, and I'm enjoying that. I suppose I just had a little twinge of, oh, is this what the interviews are meant to be about? Am I doing the right thing?
Oh, that's one of my... Like a little self-judgment. You're feeling some self-judgment.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I'm wanting some reassurance from you and some leadership from you, because you know what you want the interview to be like. So I'm happy for you to lead it back.
This is all about how do we build a culture of empathy, and I go in every which way. It's like I'm just like, wherever it goes is fine with me. And I really love kind of improv. I do this kind of improv dance, which is I don't have any idea where it's going to go, and you just kind of follow the energy. And ideally, I would like to be able to do it in an empathic way, because I'm always kind of like, well, am I really going to demonstrate empathy in this interview or in this dialogue? I kind of call them dialogues, but it's like, because I want to be able to kind of explore them to explore this topic in an empathic way, so that I'm kind of like modeling empathy. So So I hope
Yeah,
I'm
well, me
doing
too.
that.
And that's what I realized that I wanted to bring that up. You know, I was listening to an interview this morning with Dan Siegel on a site that I just found, came onto my phone somehow or other, and I'll share it with you. You may already know it. I could have got it from you for all I know, but it was fantastic, and he was actually being interviewed. It was only a week after his father had died, but and that was a very beautiful interview, and but they started the interview by actually checking in with each other about their feeling, their spiritual, physical, emotional, and what was the other one? State, and mental, I suppose. And I thought that was really nice, because we can leave ourselves and our feelings out of the picture. And so one of the things I really like is to give space for that, you know, to say and to know there always is space, that we don't have to be different in order to be able to be present and to do what's in front of us. And that can feel very hard in parts of the world where that's not an accepted thing to do. But even there, I think when you express some sense of yourself, it can really shift and open connections. Do you find that?
Yeah, it's like starting off with where are we right now in this moment? How are you feeling at this moment? What's going on inside of you at this moment? And that can be a way of kind of becoming present in the moment, and create a deeper connection in that sense, in the here and now.
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah, that's right. You know, one of the things I did want to particularly talk about today is about early childhood and parenting, because I do feel that it's the most significant point of change. You know, when you think that it only takes 25 or 30 years and you've got full adults, a new set of them in the world, and realise just what a significant thing it is, how they are treated as children and throughout their growing up, that how we treat children, therefore how we parent and how we teach and so on, is vital, is so deep. And yet it's a really difficult area, because parents themselves are so sensitive. And I find that, the big challenge is, how do we empathically awaken parents to treating children differently, perhaps? Because very often, once people start to wake up to what children's real needs are and how what they've been doing has actually been shutting them down in various ways, they feel really, really bad about it. So they hardly want to know. So this whole thing about empathy is, I think, with children and parenting, is that we need to be incredibly empathic to parents about how we introduce them to information that they haven't had before. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Are you a parent, Edwin?
I am not. I have nephews and nieces, though.
That brings me to an important topic we'll come back to, actually, about the nephews and nieces.
Well,
yeah. Tell me, you were going to say.
Oh, you're saying that parenting is. You feel that parenting is really kind of critical in kind of building this culture of empathy, that. And that it's how you talk to parents as well. Oh, I don't know. Are you still there? Your picture froze.
Exactly. Trying to do something. You want to improve.
Oh, sorry. Your picture your audio. The connection in terms of anxiety. I have a little anxiety because the connection is kind of is a little on the edge here. So yeah.
Yeah. Shall I keep?
Yeah, the connection is getting a little kind of flaky, so I just reinitiated it. You hear me?
Yes, I hear you, but it's breaking up a little bit. Do you want to turn off your video again?
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's like so often when we want to improve something and we can get on a bit of a hobby horse about it, and people say, like, you know, parents have got to be more empathic, you know.
Oh,
Come on,
I
parents,
see.
be more empathic, you know. And there's no empathy for the parent. You know, how do parents come to be the way they are, which may be quite judgmental and punishing, or certainly socializing parenting, which is, you know, the reward and punishment system, which is not the way that I would encourage parents to bring up children and to relate to children. But, you know, why are they like that? Well, because of what happened to them. And therefore they're quite wounded. You know, we all are. And so it's such a sensitive thing to awaken people to the fact that they may be, in fact, doing things which they will see, once they come to look at it, they'll think, oh, I'm damaging my child, I'm limiting my child. Well, that's a horrible feeling. So how we awaken and help people to feel empathy for themselves and for the whole of humanity and for their parents and for their teachers and all the people who might have treated them, you know, in less than ideal ways. And that's, to me, what it's all about. It's no use pointing the finger at a group and saying, well, it's parents that have to shape up, or it's teachers that have to shape up, you know?
Yeah. It's that judgment that we can't create a culture of empathy by telling people to be empathic, kind of demanding it of them, by judging them and kind of criticizing them, forcing. You can't like force it on people.
No, exactly. So it's a very delicate thing, a very gentle thing. And I do love the work that Dr. Dan Siegel's doing, and I'm grateful to you because I actually hadn't come across him until I looked up one of the video links that you have listed, and it was about the Goldie Hawn Foundation. And then I heard Dan Siegel speaking, and I've just been on a roller coaster ever since, reading his books and being totally blown away by his work.
Yeah.
Have you read his books, Edwin?
I haven't. I've seen some of his videos.
Absolutely magnificent work about empathy. I think it's called Reading. I think I might have to set you. I'm sure you have a long list of books to read, hey?
Yeah, I hope to interview him at some point. It would be nice.
Yeah. Well, his book, Mindsight, is magnificent, and it does the neurological understanding combined with the mindfulness understanding, because he does it from both directions, and the teaching is so beautiful that I've just felt it's taken my understanding to a new level and given me another whole set of tools. And I'm also incredibly impressed and excited by the Mind Up curriculum, which is his book here. I bought one of these books. This is Dan Siegel was one of the people involved in this, and this is from the Goldie Hawn Foundation. And this is for teaching what they call brain-focused strategies for learning and living. But truly speaking, it's teaching mindfulness, it's teaching empathy, it's teaching the development of the part of the brain where empathy resides. You know, of course, the empathy is embodied, but there's the prefrontal cortex is the key area of the brain, and if people have that destroyed, it's, you know, not very. Empathy is certainly not really possible, and so really that's where Dan Siegel works, is in us developing really the highest humanness as is of our neurology. And it's just beautiful, and to see what a difference it's making to teachers as well as to the kids. I mean, the whole classroom atmosphere is clearly completely different in these classrooms, and so I just want to see this everywhere, you know, and I think we will in time. So, but I think it's fantastic what you're doing with looking for the curriculum and you know, bringing people together from all over the world, and just to really think about how can we get empathy to be that word that everybody's talking about. We must have empathy growing curriculum, you know. We need to be training all of us, everyone, everywhere, for our environments to be empathy promoting. So I'm excited about what's happening already, and
just learning about where I fit into it, I suppose.
Yeah.
I can do in it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're very inspired by it seems like by the whole empathy movement and kind of wanting to kind of contribute to that. And it sounds like you're really interested in the parenting part, the early child development, and kind of fostering that part of maybe empathy in the home.
Yes, well, in the work I've done with True Purpose, you actually consult your own trusted source about what your purpose is. And without going into detail, it's quite a structured inquiry process. And it's one of the things people appreciate about it is that it is so structured, and that structure is based on the experience of thousands of people. And you actually ask about 4 aspects of your purpose. And this is cognitive stuff, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but it's essence, which is like an energy radiation; blessing, which is how you transform people, and that we don't often recognise consciously that we do that; and mission, which is like your highest level project; and your message. And they're the parts that you inquire about. And the information that's come back to me really, really clearly is that my message is to create empathic parenting for purpose. So that's why I know that the purpose piece that I'm working on is essential, but it's very much linked to empathic parenting. So that's the link that I'm developing my understanding of and my work around, I suppose. I'm not there yet, but what I've come to understand is, as well as bringing up children to have empathy, and that they don't automatically grow up and have empathy, that it's learned. They have the capacity for empathy, but what happens around them is what fosters it and what grows it, and that's how they're treated and how you treat others around them, how other people are treated by the adults around them as well, and what we allow to happen and what we don't allow to happen, how we treat the cat, you know.
Right.
I've noticed with toddlers, for instance, that it's a pretty good indicator of how actively parents understand that they have the role of teaching empathy as to how toddlers treat cats in their household. You know, and of course that, you know, because we have to teach children how to interact with animals and how to treat them, and we have to teach them that animals have feelings, and that the children don't have that at all. They don't have any understanding of that. Children will gouge their fingers into your eyes and stick their finger up your nose and pull your hair, and they'll do that to the cat because they are not born knowing that we are sentient beings somehow in that way, that we have feelings. What tends to happen is, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say that, you know, as I've looked at this more and more, I see the importance of really developing support for empathy in the family, that since it's this basic foundational social, you know, structure, that we really need a lot more material and support for nurturing families, so families can create kind of like a culture of empathy within the family, which is what I'm hearing you kind of speak towards. It's, you know, it's how the parents are relating to each other, how they're relating to, you know, others. You know, are they out judging others? Are they, you know, empathizing with people outside? Do they have support? Do they have empathic support, you know, from the society that kind of nurtures them? And how do they treat their animals? You know, so the children will see and model that. And so there's a whole environment that needs to be created that creates this supportive and empathic environment within the family. And, you know, we need to kind of find ways of doing that and supporting it with maybe training materials, with, you know, social programs that I've seen some programs where parents get together and they have like empathy buddies of other parents, that if they have a problem.
Have you?
And there's here in Palo Alto, in the Bay Area, I saw a program that one woman has where she's setting up networks where the parents can listen. You know, they can call each other up, or they get together in support groups. So it's like parent support groups for empathic listening. And it's a little bit structured around, you know, each parent getting a chance to listen, to be heard, you know, and that can really help with, you know, with them creating that environment and having that support.
Yes, well, this is very much the kind of direction that Robin Grill's work goes in, and he's written another book as well as Parenting for a Peaceful World. He's written a book called Heart-to-Heart Parenting, which is very much empathic parenting. And one of the key points he makes, though, is that parents need a lot more support to be able to be in a condition to be empathic. Parents actually need allo parents, and it brings me back to you and your nephews and nieces, Edwin, because what you're being, I think that you are quite connected to your nephews and nieces. Is that right?
They're not too far away.
I don't know how involved you are with them, or but in fact, it's something that we're becoming aware of, is, scientifically, in terms of the history and evolution of humanity, is that we didn't actually evolve in a nuclear family type setting, and that there were what they call allo parents, which is other parents, and that the kind of primates that we evolved from are the ones that share parenting. They're not the one. There are some primates that do have nuclear families, but we didn't evolve from that stream. And that, in fact, there's some evidence that in order to grow the large brain, that was essential, to have a bunch of adults supporting the child. Because of the long childhood, you have to have a long childhood to have this brain that does all this learning over a long period. And it's extremely hard to be a parent. It's the hardest possible thing you can ever do, and people want to do it so incredibly well, but to do it in a nuclear family setting with two parents working, and to really bring to, and to really be feeling open-hearted and rested enough to meet children emotionally, it's just about impossible. It's so difficult. It's incredibly difficult. We have to lean towards controlling children rather than connecting with them, which is the empathic way, because our time schedules, all of the rest of it, children, being bundled out of bed and off to childcare and here and there on a time schedule, that's actually not what children really need. And to do that without being harsh or pushy or coercive, it's almost impossible. So I don't know how we get there, but we certainly need more allo parents, and that means the people who don't have children, their own biological children, that they see themselves as part of the parenting of the human race, because they're needed, and that they develop strong bonds with children, and they take some of the pressure off the parents and allow the parents to rest and be there for the children more. So the children are getting rested, present adults in their lives who love them, not just professionals, but people who love them and who are tuned into them and who are in a rested enough state to be able to meet them emotionally. And so that's it's not so much teaching parents, it's supporting them as well as teaching them and informing them, that it's too big a job, actually. And they're not going to be able to do what we want them to do to create this empathic next generation on their own, the parents, not the biological parents. We all need to be parents.
Yeah, it's really a whole support system that needs to be developed. I had interviewed someone who was talking about healthcare. We had terrible healthcare in the United States with so many people uninsured. And I said, well, what's the value behind that? And she was saying it's that sense of security when parents feel so insecure about their healthcare, that that insecurity translates to the whole family, and so that insecurity is going to be diminishing empathy. So it's like we really want to create a social structure that maximizes support for empathy and all the things that can support it, including healthcare is one of them. Knowing that you're secure in your healthcare is one thing that takes a little bit of stress off, and
that's true. And when you come back to security, it leads me back to thinking about Dan Siegel's work and some aha things that came to me from that, and only in the last year or so, and that was about secure attachment. We know that the early attachment to the parent, the bond between parent and child, is, and particularly mother generally, is so significant in later life, and the more you learn about it, the more it can seem rather depressing, because when you realise that insecure attachment in its various forms has such a long-term effect that you wonder how we're going to break the cycle, because it's these parents who were insecurely attached and who feel insecure who then perpetuate it, and we all do that. And that also is how we govern and all of our institutions. They reflect the insecure attachment of the infants that the adults were. So, where do we break this cycle? Now, the exciting thing in Dan Siegel's work is that he's really documented information that I didn't know about in research, which is about earned or acquired secure attachment. So it's about how people make the journey from having had insecure attachment and all the tendencies that will lead to in later life, including to being parents who then have children who are insecurely attached. How do you break that? Is that it's through, there are ways that people who've had the most horrendous childhoods and been treated, abused appallingly, can recover and acquire inner security, this secure attachment. And I think that's one of the most exciting developments of the lot. And that's about how we make meaning of our lives. So it's not what happens to us in our lives has been discovered, it's how we make meaning of it. And that's our route to this acquired secure attachment. So I think that needs a lot more work, because parents can know that they want to do things differently from what happened to them, but that doesn't mean that they can, that they're able to. So they need a route to that healing and narrative, meaning making. That's part of what I dream of seeing is some, sort of lots of these groups of parents meeting together online or wherever, or physically, and learning about how they make the story of their own life make sense to them. And then they are able to be quite different in the world. And to me, that's what will lead to different healthcare. I mean, it's the chicken and egg, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have enough empathic people in government for them to feel that feeling that you described, where when you feel empathy, you naturally want to act with empathy, want to act in a helpful way to people. You don't have to think, oh, okay, I'm feeling empathy, or what should I do? When you might look around for what to do, but the feeling of wanting to do something is already there. And that's what empowers people to do it. And when we have people like that in government, there's no way we could have you could have the healthcare system you have now if there was a highly empathic population of people amongst the policy makers, is there?
Yeah. Well, the part that I'm looking at is to have the vision of a culture of empathy. So it's kind of, for me, it's helpful to kind of put that vision out there so we have something to kind of work towards, and then kind of do all the work to create that vision, to actualize that
absolutely.
vision. So it's like you were saying, empathy was a large, that one book you were talking about that was an inspiration to you, that, maybe empathy is not even used there as a word, but the essence of the empathy is there. So it's helpful to have the vocabulary to be able to lay out a vision, and I call it a culture of empathy, whereas empathy becomes like a primary social value, and we're very conscious and explicit about talking about it. And then have all the science, like, Dan Siegel and so many other scientists who are articulating why scientifically it's important. So we have the science as well as the stories, the anecdotal, and the experiential as well, to kind of move towards that vision. Yes. So that's what I'm putting out there.
Absolutely, totally understand you putting it out there, and I'm totally with you with that vision. And we have to do it at every angle. At every level. Think about, yes, a more empathic society has better healthcare. So how can we work on the healthcare? Not waiting till we've got the new generation of more empathic people. Absolutely. I mean, we have to work with adults. That's the point. Children are the new generation that we want to bring up to be more empathic. But in order to do that, the adults need to want to and to work on actively practicing growing their own empathy. The children can't grow up to be empathic without adults who are practicing empathy around them.
Yeah. Well,
So
it's kind of like, how do we get from
has to
here to there? And one thing I'm looking at now is, one is to create a dialogue about it, like we're doing. So just you and I kind of talking here is kind of, facilitating this dialogue, showing people, hey, there's people talking about the importance of this. And then it's kind of getting people who already value empathy to start networking, to start building, a social network so that we can kind of support each other and, dialogue like we're doing, and find the ways of working together to slowly or quickly transform society. And I think it's so important that we start networking with each other around the world.
Totally with you, Edwin. I really appreciate what you're doing. I'm not quite sure where my connection into it is. You know what I mean? Like, because we're always got such full lives and little time that we need to find the best connection point, what to pick of the things to work on. And I suppose in terms of the networking, what I particularly would love to do is to meet up with more people around the world who are working in a similar mission, empathic parenting for purpose, because it's quite and I want to talk about that to people and see if anybody else is thinking of it similarly and how we can work together. It's not a one-person job, this kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's for teams, isn't it? It's for networks to do it. And I just want to say a little bit more about that parenting for purpose part of it, because the thing I've come to realize with my own experience of parenting is that I got it about empathy as a parent early on, although I didn't use the word as such, as the main organizing word, but that I definitely felt this thing that I needed to do when the disconnect was happening, and how I had to, and how there was a way of opening and hearing, and then the reconnection would occur, and then the whole thing would resolve, So I learned how to do that. And since then I've been thinking, and about teaching children empathy as well. I think I taught people to see how what their children, what they were doing affected others and so on quite well. But then I came to this purpose piece, and I've realized that there's a way of approaching children, and with the understanding that they come here with an orientation, if you like. I mean, the word purpose is a funny one, but it's like, it's not that there's some specific thing already exists that they're going to do, but there's a way that they are oriented and shaped, which means that they will that they bring something particular to the world, and that if we see ourselves as not knowing what they need, but rather being the observers and the learners from them about their purpose, and then we can learn to provide the most nourishing growth environment possible for that child to realise their true power and purpose in the world. And, you do hear about children who've had this kind of environment, and they're quite extraordinary. And we think that this is just because they were unique to begin with. And I'm not so sure. I mean, I really think that in every child there is so much. So they are also extraordinary. We know their ability to learn and problem solve is extraordinary. It's as good as it ever is in the whole of life. Perhaps that's at its greatest level. And they all have a passion for the world to start off with, unless they're very early receive abuses of various kinds. So I really want to get together with other people to learn about how we provide the kind of environment which grows empathy, which includes boundaries, of course, because empathy, when we understand that there are other people, we have to limit ourselves so that we're not damaging others, hurting others, etc. At the same time, though, it takes the limits off and lets children explore and keeps on testing to see what is it they're trying to explore, rather than thinking we know. Like, just because they bang things, they're not necessarily going to be a drummer. We don't immediately categorize them into something. And so how we do that, because inside the children are the capacities to solve human problems. Children that grow up in a collaborative environment where everybody is seen to have this purpose, not one special kid that we're all working on, but where we're all being given as much space as possible to grow our unique each other at the same time. That's the kind of parenting that I'm wanting to explore with others, how to do that. So I'm keen to, to start having these conversations.
Yeah, so that might come from just empathically listening to the children, to what's going on for them, so they can see that they're heard and seen and kind of reflected. And I just did a panel discussion with some people from 3 women from Seattle, Washington, and it was on nurturing empathy in the home, attachment and reflective capacity was the title of the panel.
Okay.
And it was, they were actually in a program that went to to families with newborn children. And there's a link to that from the homepage, cultureofempathy.com. So they were kind of doing that. They were basically going and listening to the, and supporting families with newborns. And then we're starting an empathy movement project. So we're starting an empathy movements project with small group discussions. And that we just create, if you see the Culture of Empathy Facebook page, there's links to that. And we're meeting in small groups of 4, kind of 5 maximum, and in kind of a circle process. And in the last group, there was somebody who was actually also Shelley, who was very much into that, childhood development. So it's a big part. And so we could maybe kind of continue this dialogue through some of those, group circle processes where we get together and talk about how do we. The idea is that we talk in a kind of a circle process about that we want to. Our vision is to foster empathy in the world, and we kind of talk about what are our challenges or successes, and each person can share a story and be empathically heard, and then kind of maybe work through one of the challenges they're having, and then with the overall vision of fostering empathy in the world. So we've gone for about an hour and 10 minutes. So I usually like to go for about an hour. So maybe we can bring this call to a close, but we have more panel discussions. We can keep the dialogue going.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Edwin. Hey, turn your camera back on.
Yeah, I just turned it on. I wanted to be sure you could see me.
And I was just, we have gone for a long time, and it feels like we could talk forever. And I was just thinking with that model of the groups, is that would be something that maybe I could get going over here with the Empathy Foundation members. So, because it's a bit more difficult doing it across continents, although it's great to do that as well. But to get some local ones happening, I'd be interested to learn about, if there's a sort of a model that we could adopt and experiment with here.
We're actually developing the model kind of as we go. We only had the first meeting, and we're kind of developing a model, a reproducible circle. We call it an empathy circle. The vision, the vision of the empathy circle is to build a culture of empathy, and everybody brings their stories, their challenges or successes, and they're empathically heard about it.
Yeah.
And then, so then, the next time we come back, and then we're just meeting on an ongoing, weekly, whatever basis.
I've had a vision of something like that. So it's incredibly exciting to hear that you're doing it. I'd love to join in with that, and then to see if we can try it out here.
Yeah. And maybe we could start together. And then we have 3 coming up. So 2 this Saturday, and then maybe 1 next Monday. So we're looking at having like 3 of these going. You can join one. You can help kind of develop the circle process.
Terrific.
And then it's just reproducible. And then...
marvelous. Brilliant. That's so good. Yeah, and it's interesting because, we went through a lot of kind of visioning. I better wind up, I know, but for the Empathy Foundation. And, they say that you vision something and then it happens. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to do it. And this was one of our visions, the same kind of thing of these sort of empathy circles, empathy practice kind of groups meeting up and supporting each other.
And it's on Skype.
So it's very,
it's Google Hangout, so we can have, we want 4 or 5 people per circle, which is a good amount, so everybody can be heard and it doesn't get too big. But had a great time. So.
Great.
I'll send.
No, I read about that. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Edwin. It's been really lovely. It's really nice to have had a long conversation with you.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I'm so glad to have connected on this, and I feel like we're going to be keeping the energy going. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to that.
Very energizing. Yeah, me too.
Okay, Alice. Then for now, bye.
Bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.